Okay, welcome Warrior fans. We're back at it. This time we have the graciousness of two guests with us this afternoon, and Roberta Anding and Leslie Bonci of Performance365.org. They have an immense experience in the world of sports performance, both collegiately and professionally, and I'm going to let them touch on that a little bit more before we get going. So one of you two lovely ladies want to take it away.
Hey, Roberta, why don't you start and I'll fill in.
Okay. Well, my name is Roberta Anding. I'm a sports dietitian based in Houston and currently am the sports dietitian for the Rice University Owls. In addition, historically, I was the first dietitian for the Houston Texans and essentially the first dietitian for the Houston Astros. Worked for the Texans for 12 years and the Astros for 9. Also worked for the Houston Ballet and was the director of sports nutrition at Texas Children's Hospital. So as you said, Joey, a little bit of collegiate as well as pro experience.
Awesome. And Joey, my name is Leslie Bonci. I am a registered dietitian, also board certified a specialist in sports dietetics, as is Roberta. And we founded our company a couple of years ago, but prior to that, and still currently, so I am the sports dietitian for the 2020 World Champion Super Bowl Kansas City Chiefs, which is kind of awesome, although working with them virtually, not quite the same, but it's a lot safer this year. This is now my 7th season with them. I worked for 24 years for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I worked with the Pittsburgh Penguins, and then also in baseball, the Pirates, the Blue Jays, the Nationals, the Reds, and the Brewers. Have worked with Olympic athletes, was with the University of Pittsburgh Department of Athletics for about 25 years. Carnegie Mellon University as well, kind of the theme of Pittsburgh, which is where I live, and also working with active people that might not necessarily define themselves as athletes. The Pittsburgh Ballet, and Roberta and I and Jen Ketterly through our Performance365 company worked with the inaugural season of the XFL, and we're hoping that maybe it comes back, and that more importantly that they want us to continue to work with them.
That's fantastic. Thank you guys so much again for sharing some of your time, and we'll dive right into some questions. I think hopefully our student athletes and the community watching will get some benefit out of it. So whoever wants to take this first one, as we, with your experience in diets and dietetics, what is the misconception about diets? There's so many different ones, but is there a positive or negative misconceptions about them?
I think there's a lot. And the first thing I would say is, people hear the word diet and they hear the first 3 letters. And right there, if not positive, I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. And diet really means meal plan. But that's not the way it gets interpreted. It gets interpreted as deprivation, denial, I can't, I shouldn't. And unfortunately, oftentimes might create too big of a caloric deficit, number one, and certainly doesn't provide nutritional adequacy. And we always talk about eating as being something that benefits head to toe and no incurred baggage in a negative way. And unfortunately, many of the times the way that people approach diet does just that, and especially if they are active people. Roberta?
Yeah, 100% agree with you, Leslie, that it has this really negative connotation, and part of that is pushed up by social media, right? So you can log into social media and it's in extremes in carbohydrate restrictions or extremes in fat restrictions, and that's almost what people think of when they think of diet. And as sports dietitians, our goal is always to talk about performance nutrition, performance eating, and not really restriction. I also want to add in here, and I'm sure we'll get to it, but I also want to add in here that with the pandemic and a lot of high school athletes coming into college, we also get this idea that diet means somehow perfection. And oh my goodness, it can't be good for you if it comes from a can. It can't be good for you if it's frozen. So we then cross into diet really meaning food elitism, that you have to eat a certain way or otherwise your performance is going to suffer. And you do need carbohydrate, proteins, and fats, but it can come from the shelf as much as it can come from, a really fancy organic restaurant.
Awesome. building on that, and you both kind of touched on a little bit, obviously in the world of sports performance, we deal so much with athletes needing, or coaches telling them they need to either gain or lose weight. And, obviously there's got to be some sort of deficit, as you said, but in a healthy way. So what are some safe strategies that you might suggest for an athlete trying to put on some positive weight, or maybe just need to lose a little bit of healthy weight? What are some strategies they can implement?
Well, let's start with the losing, and basically what we don't want is, we don't want loss of lean mass, right?
Mm-hmm.
We don't want bone changes in an adverse way. We don't want that. We want to preserve lean mass, and we want to decrease body fat. Now, that's not going to just happen 100%, that it's just about body fat, or people are targeting and just sucking something out of their behind. It doesn't work that way. But the reality is that oftentimes people get too extreme. Let me ramp up my physical activity and let me significantly diminish what it is that I'm eating. Well, then you're too fatigued to do what you need to do in terms of your sport, right? So that's a problem. Or you might increase the risk of injury. And for our collegiate athletes, you need to have some fuel up here to be able to sit and attend in the classroom. So we don't want it to be drastic. And what I typically do is when I start with my athletes who indeed have the goal of losing body fat, is I want a snapshot of what they do currently. We have to have a starting place, and it's not just picking something out of the air. Starting place. So maybe somebody's getting a lot of their calories from the beverages that they consume. That might be a good thing to do because they can still hydrate, but they can do that at a lower calorie cost than they would otherwise. Or maybe people engage in activities where it's little and then eat a cow as the day goes on. So they're shoveling in food at the end of the day. They may not really be hungry, and there may be some ways to tweak it without thinking diet, without thinking cut, without starving during the day. Roberta.
I don't know if she dropped off here. You may have to just keep it flowing for us, Leslie.
All right, absolutely. So, in addition to that, when it comes to trying to decrease body fat, here's the way that I like the plate to look. We kind of visualize that. If 50% of that plate is produce in some way, shape, or form. So fruit, vegetable, and Roberta said it could be fresh, it could be canned, frozen, dried, not a Fruit Loop, but we got a lot of other options that are there. If we're looking at about 30% of the plate to be protein. So if that is chicken, if it's fish, if it's meat, if it's eggs, if it's tofu because somebody wants to do that, ramping up that protein a little bit means that you're less hungry between meals, and again, not going to see that drop in terms of lean mass. And then about a quarter of the plate being carbs. So that's not no carb. But that might mean if I want to have a burger, maybe I'm not doing the fries. Or I really want to have the fries, so I'll eat the burger without. Or, maybe I want to have ice cream and I'll do that instead of the rice. So it's kind of like pick and choose. That kind of a look to the plate over the course of the day would be really helpful. Now, on the other side of this, and, a lot of time, if I have somebody I work with that's trying to gain mass, everybody else says, oh boy, I wish that was my problem. Well, people fail to realize it can be a full-time job. If you are trying to put mass on, you have to eat probably significantly more than you would otherwise. And it gets to the point where if your gut is feeling so uncomfortable, that's the deal breaker, right? Not going to be able to eat more. So we talk about hiding the calories. How can we ramp up the calorie cost in things that are consumed? So if I have an athlete that says to me, I drink 9 to 10 glasses of water a day. All right, bravo for the hydration, F for the calories. They're not there. So could somebody do milk instead? Could maybe they have maybe a glass that's 50-50 juice to water. Well, now there's some calories in there. You're still hydrating, but it's a relatively easy way to do things. Thinking about maybe a little bit more nut butter on the bread, or, maybe adding some nuts into a salad, or doing something like a granola as opposed to a flake cereal, because you're going to double the calories, but you're not doubling the volume in the stomach. So it feels a lot more comfortable. And the other thing is kind of realistic expectations. From a weight loss perspective, I really don't like to see more than a pound a week, just because I think people get too crazy otherwise. From a muscle gain perspective, it's probably about the same or maybe a little less. Oh, I ate more for one day, so I should see a 5-pound increase in a week. Not going to happen. It is a slow, steady way of accomplishing that, and preferably out of season, not during season, because there's too many other things that need to be attended to.
Awesome. Jump in here, Leslie, with an additional comment, is that when we talk about gaining lean body mass,
There's only so much muscle you can gain. And if you look at the data, maybe 1.5 pounds per week. So if a coach says, I need you to gain 5 pounds in a week, you are going to make that athlete fat. And that's the only word that I can use, is you're going to make them fat. And the question I always ask is, are you working with a strength coach? Because if you're just eating to gain and you're not lifting, or you're not the all-out worker in the weight room, you can gain weight all right, but you're not going to really be looking at this as performance enhancing as much as you are, you know, gut busting. You're going to be looking at someone who, now you've got someone who's slow. If it's football, they're slow off the line. If it's track and field, you can just imagine. So we really have to marry into this conversation about body mass gain and loss is, do you have the ability to do body composition? And without that, you're making an educated guess. So can your sports dietitian use calipers if that's the only tool you have? How about your strength coach? Do you have the availability of a DEXA or a bod pod so you can really track it? So again, I think most people can gain and lose weight with some common sense tips, just like Leslie gave you. The question is, how do you get to the desired body composition? And that is where it is a sports dietitian and a strength coach partnering together, not working independently.
Awesome.
Joey, I would add one more thing to that, that
please.
Also we're giving you general tips of things that we've done with our athletes and non-athletes, but you know, to really do it the right way, everybody has things that they like and they don't like, and times of the day that they're hungry or otherwise. So that idea of customize and personalize and individualize, that is what is going to help somebody achieve the goals and stay there. Instead of kind of, okay, I did it really, really quickly, but now I'm finding it very difficult to maintain because it was too drastically different.
Right. In rolling with that, you know, the fear is right now we have a lot of athletes at home across the country not able to go to school. Maybe their physical activity level has dropped, you know, through all this COVID. So, you know, they're home or mom is cooking and dad's cooking and grandparents are cooking and family meals. What are some strategies maybe they can avoid overeating while at home? There's just probably going to be more accessibility to possibly snacks and ability like that. So what are some things they can do to avoid overeating at home, or make sure they're balancing their nutrition at home when maybe they don't have the access to the dining hall or things of that nature?
I think something that to me that's important is a schedule. And I think at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, people were sleeping in, you know, classes were being virtual and they're being recorded so people could sleep in and listen to the class whenever they wanted to. Then they get up at 11 and their day is not structured. And as human beings, we're creatures of habit. And so staying with some kind of schedule is important. And then I'm not a real big fan of people pantry grazing. Your eyes and your brain can't remember what you eat unless you see it on a plate. So if you go into the pantry and you say, hey, who ate all the Triscuits? There's a pretty good chance it was you, but you just don't remember, right? Or my roommate ate all my granola, or my roommate ate all my trail mix. No, they really didn't. You did. You just didn't remember. So to me, when the schedule is a little wonky, putting foods on a plate, making a commitment not to just go open the refrigerator or the pantry and graze is something that's really very simple. And I think that's for all of us to avoid that quarantine 15 is a schedule is really pretty important.
The other thing that I think, a couple things that make a difference is, one is actually being involved in the process, not only of the hand to mouth activity, but the things around it. Is if mom or dad or a grandma or whoever else is in the house cooking, lend a hand or two and maybe do chop things or do stir things or do season things, because that's part of the way that we enjoy food, not just the sitting down to eat it. Also thinking about as part of the plate, and I talked about this when I said this Wayne plate, or you know how we would decrease body fat, is making sure that we have things with fiber on the plate. Well, that's what fruits and vegetables do. That's what beans do. So for instance, even taking a can of white bean and pureeing them and adding them into a spaghetti sauce, You don't add a lot of calories. You add some protein, you add some fiber, you feel a little fuller. And to kind of also dovetail on what Roberta said, I'm a very big fan of utensils instead of just fingers to eat. When you use a utensil, you can only put so much on there at a time unless you're using a spear, and hopefully not. So, you know, it's a way of slowing down a little bit so you actually get a chance for your body to recognize that you've eaten something instead of this drive-by eating that goes on where we're more inclined to overconsume what we do.
I'm really glad you mentioned the speed portion. Now, obviously, different strategies for different needs, but in general, like, what is a good pace for eating? Is there? I'm not telling people to count their chews or anything like that, but I'm sure that's been done in the past to control eating. But is there a certain pace that we're looking to eat at to maintain a healthy lifestyle, whether that's, you know, a positive weight gain, positive weight loss? Is there a time that we're looking? You know, it's not going to be 5 minutes, I imagine.
Yeah, no. You know, there's been a lot that's been written about this. So probably looking at 15, 20 minutes for a meal. You know, we're not asking somebody to sit for 2 hours, and they do in France. That's lovely. Most people won't. But if you're going to try and do that, is the idea of, okay, I'm putting food on a fork, a spoon, it's in my mouth, the utensil goes down, I chew, I swallow, I repeat the action. Now, just doing that will slow down the amount of time that it takes you to eat, simply because there's more steps involved. Or if I have an apple in my hand, instead of it hovering 1 millimeter from my face, I'm taking a bite, I'm putting it down, I'm chewing, I'm swallowing, I'm picking it up. All of those things can help somebody to extend their meal. So things that require more chewing, like salads, vegetables, fruits, or even having soup, a beverage that you have to eat a little bit more slowly because otherwise you burn your esophagus. Those types of things can be really helpful too. So putting the fill in that is not filling out, but filling up is really important as a way of helping to slow down.
Yeah,
Roberta, how about you?
Yeah, in addition to that would be, just like Leslie said, if you're taking that pause and putting something down, it may be a good idea to take a sip of a beverage. You know, whether it's water, whether it's milk, having something to drink. And for those of us who do everything fast, walk fast, talk fast, eat fast, this is actually purposeful. This is really purposeful. You really have to think about this. And I know when I go out to eat with friends, I'm always the first one done. So when I pace myself, I don't want to be the first one done. So I'm following Leslie's suggestions and putting down my fork, and I'll drink, you know, water or iced tea in between bites. And then I look at how everybody else is eating, because it seems a little rude if you're the first one done and everybody still has 2/3 of their plate left and you're done and you're ready for dessert or you're ready for coffee. So I think that pacing is important, and the behavioral tips that Leslie gave, I think are, although they seem sort of silly when you think about it, like, well, why do I need to put my fork down? It's because you're really trying to establish an eating pace, as you said, Joey. You're really trying to establish that pace. There are times I've done the opposite. If I have someone who's a really hard gainer, they're really hard gainers, I'll tell them to eat the most calorically dense things first and then follow it up and maybe save their beverage to the end of the meal rather than during the meal, because they're just going to run out of real estate. There's just not going to be enough room in their stomach anymore. So I think it also depends on goals.
And then one other thing is the way that people serve in their home. You know, a lot of people serve family style. So that big bowl of potatoes, maybe the bowl of Brussels sprouts isn't so big, but it's already on the table. So it's, you know, how does somebody find their spoon automatically in that bowl of potatoes again and plop on the plate and then in the mouth? Yep. So, you know, if people don't do that and they portion or plate from the kitchen, sit down and eat, then you don't have that visual stimulus saying, come on, have some more. All those things can be really, really helpful.
Awesome. So shifting gears here, and I hope